Therefore, the majority of his family obviously disapprove because I'm so much older than he is. But we are so lucky, so very, very lucky to have found one another and have the support of at least one of his family, his sister. That helped tremendously.
The difficulty is now that I've given up my private accommodation, I'm now living in a housing trust, and we're living with other people in close proximity. It makes it more difficult for me to carry on my mode of living, and a lot of people are taken by surprise, and they find it quite hard to accept. They think I'm something that I'm not, that I have leanings towards homosexuality, which I certainly don't. The one thing that has always fascinated me about sometimes wanting to dress as a woman is the danger of it all. I like the I like the danger of it. You know, it excites me, and it gives me a reason for, in a way, for existing, because it's not a thing that everybody has some sort of yearnings to do something or other, but this is an extreme mode of a yearning, I suppose, being wanting to look like a woman. But it's something that I've always felt comfortable about, and I appreciate the support that people like Matty, who I've known for a long time, has given me, and I do appreciate that. Some people are very, very understanding, and she has always been understanding of my, you could call it my plight, I suppose. And other people are disrespectful and do not really understand what your situation is, and they do not like explanations either, so they just see things at face value. But I will carry on being what I am, and I will adapt to the place that I live now, and continue to experience the thing that I like doing, and that is sometimes dressing up as a woman.
Bad, good, crap, bed, floor, sofa. These single words.
I never really heard them talk about sex at all. I wasn't aware of any sexual activity. I was aware of my mother's sometimes wistfulness about somebody she'd obviously known and fancied or loved prior to meeting my dad, and she referred to him occasionally and not very often. I think he was probably killed in the First World War. That's my surmise. But they were very fond of each other. There wasn't a great deal of physical contact informally, though they would hold hands sometimes, and yes, they liked each other. There was no doubt about that. It seems to me, looking back, I was in their bed most nights for a good deal of it, and I wonder how my dad reacted to that, enforced contraceptive between them.
I like with the rings.
Actually,
the
you
rings
could
nice.
be proposing to me.
And in my culture, talking about sex was like a taboo. They used not to talk about it. And I think men, they could enjoy sex more than the women. Because like a woman, after 30, they would think, no, you've had enough. Like my grandfather, he used to have any woman. He had enough money to convince women and he had over 30 women. And I hated it. When I think of my grandmother who has just passed away, I think she didn't really have that life, sex life, because when she brought up her children, they were about 10, and then she was expected to look after the granddaughters, the grandchildren. So I can imagine she didn't have time on her own, too much to do, and I don't think she really had time to think of sex or enjoy or meet men. And she wanted it. Because I remember she said one time her husband cheated on her. Unfortunately, she became blind in 86. So she said if she hadn't lost her sight, she would go out and meet other men, and just to make him feel how it feels to be cheated on. So I just feel, oh God. And I used to sleep in their rooms, so I think, oh God. They didn't really enjoy sex. They slept in separate beds, and I can't remember any moment seeing them together or being close. And I think my grandfather had more because he used to go out and meet other people. In fact, now he still goes out and meet women. And for her, I think I wish she had more than what she had, because she wanted it, I think. So if I compare Western world, they have day centers. I was happy to read in Metro where a man got a wife after, 90? They went there. I was so happy. I'm like, some people can do it. And I would like women in my culture to be more, to fight for their rights, than to step back and say, okay, you're too old for sex. No, I want them to come out and really enjoy it. Yeah.
Apparently, like a lot of the ladies in the family, and I think her older brother as well, rather too fond of sex, I think. We had that in the family. In fact, for about 10 years after they were married, my mother had quite a few boyfriends, uncles. From the diary, Mum's diary, it was a question of Mum was consoling him, and she had had sex with him before marriage, so that was the way of trapping him. I figured that one out. That was weird. I thought, oh yes, very romantic, and they fell in love, and, all that kind of thing. But as I was growing older slightly older, later teens, kind of realized my mother was so bloody frigid, and I'm thinking, you've gone from one extreme to the other. What's happening? I know my dad wants sex. I can sort of sense it, but she wasn't having anything to do with it. There was this man hanging on for dear life and keeping on hoping it wasn't going to happen. And I think, what a waste. What a waste.
My granddad, very well known for his womanising, so I was very aware from when I was younger that he used to have many of women, and because he was from Jamaica, it was considered good to have many of women. He was about 70, 79, I think he was, and he was still rather on it, he was still rather active, sexually active, I guess. But we thought our granddad, rather funny, got lots of women, he's still at it, but yeah, it was rather funny, actually, to think of it. My grandma, she had a stroke at a very young age, so I've always known her to be single, and I've always never thought about that she might still have sexual thoughts, and yeah, I never ever did think about that. So it was kind of a cool idea to have my granddad as a young stud, or whatever.
And do you think you'd have found it rather funny if your grandmother was doing the same thing?
No, I wouldn't have found that funny at all, actually.
So I just find it really interesting that, to start with, for her, a white woman in the 1950s from a fairly middle-class family was courageous enough to put herself in a situation where she was getting black African boyfriends. And I say boyfriends because I later have found out through an aunt and uncle of mine that my mum was actually had quite a few men on the go when she was younger, which was really interesting to hear, that she clearly was, expressing herself sexually, mainly African men. So again, it's a really interesting choice, and I imagine there's all sorts of images or ideas that people have about African masculinity and sex, and what does it mean for a white woman to have sex with a black man, and all that kind of stuff, which is probably still a very interesting issue now, but certainly in the 1950s it was a hot issue. From a personal point of view, I have to also say that I found out that my mum was never actually quite sure who my father was. And I'd actually find that quite amusing. I'm not unduly worried about it, but I just find it amazing that she was, she was a goer. It's a really silly and simple story, but my uncle always used to sleep with no pyjamas on, and my aunt would mention this on quite a few occasions, and as younger children we thought this was very amusing, that this uncle of ours went to bed with nothing on, completely naked. My aunt is still alive, she's in her 90s, and one of her hobbies is painting, and one of her favourite pictures is a painting of her husband, my uncle, naked on the bed. And she thinks very fondly about that, and she tells stories about when they were courting and when they were younger, and how he took her off to a nudist beach and so on. So she has very fond memories, and it's really nice to hear her talking in an uninhibited way about her enjoyment of the marriage. Not feeling alone in the world, having someone there who's really special. All sorts of other words, shagging, caressing, licking, sucking, tasting, enjoying.
Sex, please, more of it. Thank you.
I'm going to talk about the OAPs using public funds to seek prostitutes or buy sex. I'm quite concerned about the whole issue, in the sense that whereas I think that we are looking for needs-led service, and in this age of personal budgets and self-assessments, older people should be allowed to buy a service they think meets their needs best. They should be allowed to go and use the personal budgets to do that. But at the same time, I feel that there is no monitoring about the sexual health for these people, and what about the implications for the sexual health of the older people? Who looks after these issues? Who monitors these? Who makes sure that the sex that these older people are buying is safe, and that they are not risking their health in the process of doing so? Hi, John. Hi. I'm going to ask you about using public funds to buy sex. Have you ever considered buying sex, or have you ever bought sex?
Oh yes, on a regular basis, yes. And I wouldn't have any qualms about using my my benefit money, except because it's all for my well-being, and I consider sex for my well-being and my general sort of.
So, was it difficult finding such a place or such a person to have sex with, or was it quite easy?
Not at all, no, because I've got friends who use women of the night, as they say, and I had no problems at all. I got contacts from them, and in a way I felt secure about that because they'd used them and they were qualified to say whether they were okay or whether they weren't. So I followed along those lines.